HB Next is the pioneer of compliance as a service, consolidating how industrial companies manage risk and compliance within their organizations, protecting more than 1 million lives, servicing over 5,000 clients, and bringing over 500 years of safety and business continuity domain expertise for our clients. Built as a comprehensive solution, Sequence XT combines people, technology, and processes to create a robust firewall of protection for owners and stakeholders in an easy-to-use platform. Sequence XT and HB Next is your trusted partner in compliance, risk management, safety, and business continuity. HB Next.
Thank you, listeners. We wanted to provide a quick overview of HB Next so you know who we are, the industries that we cover, and provide a backdrop to our expertise in construction, environmental, stormwater, due diligence, and of course the topic of today, transportation, fleet, and DOT. Welcome to the inaugural episode of The Drive Transportation Podcast, where we're going to delve into topics that matter in the lives of professional transportation, DOT, and fleet. Please add your questions in the chat. We're happy to answer them in the Q&A session at the end of the podcast. And let me just turn this over to our host, Kevin Colton. Here he is.
Hey, welcome everybody. I'm Kevin Colton, the host of The Drive. I'm going to be taking you through the 100 days of summer. Who's out there? Who's out there? We're going to touch base a little bit on how we can prepare our drivers and help our drivers drive more defensively and what to look at during the summer months. Then we're going to get into who's riding dirty, what summertime roadside inspection blitzes that we're going to have going on for law enforcement that's going to be conducting out there. And then we'll talk a little bit about preparing your drivers, what you and a company, your drivers, your maintenance program should look about. A little bit on onboarding, ongoing training, and maintaining the proper documentation for not only you, but your drivers and vehicles. Then we'll answer some questions at the end of the show. So let's get right into it. The 100 days of summer and who's out there. An interesting fact that we all realize that there's more and more traffic out there on the roadway. But the Bureau of Labor Statistics has put out some information, and they said in 2020 that there was roughly about 228 million licensed drivers out there on our roadways. As of 2023, that projection was going to be more than 243 million drivers. 89% of drivers are above the age of 23. So what's that tell you? About 11% are under the age of 23, or about 1 out of every 10 drivers is fairly young and new to the driving. And with our commercial drivers, we see that there are a little more than 2 million licensed CDL drivers right now on the public roadways. With the increasing demand for commercial drivers, we're seeing a national increase of about 4% over the next several years, and that growth really is continuing. So who's out there driving on our roadways this summer? We have a lot of people who are out of school, people who are on vacation. We just see a lot of traffic everywhere that we seem to go. So we have drivers on the roadway. More and more, we're seeing new drivers, first-time drivers, licensed that just received their new driver's license, their new commercial driver's license. So remember, all of us as drivers, we all had to start out somewhere. Have patience with those drivers if you come across them, if they're in front of you, if they fail to put their turn signal on, or maybe they're just trying to figure out where they're at. All of us just need to slow down in our busy days and relax a little bit. We're all going to get there. The important thing is to get there safely. So let's talk about our highways. What are we seeing in the summer months on our highways? And really, what is that bringing? It's bringing families going on vacation. They're traveling through and going from Chicago down to Florida for that summer beach vacation. They come through Atlanta, they may be very unfamiliar with busy roadways, signs, speed limits. So give them that extra little bit of space, that little bit of courtesy to those drivers that are unfamiliar with where they're at. And then for my commercial drivers and my fleet drivers, that may be my landscape companies, my local delivery drivers, where you're used to driving in our residential neighborhoods during the work week and it's relatively quiet. But now school's out. What do we have out there? We have kids that are out playing in the yards, they're playing basketball in the cul-de-sac. Take a little extra time, pay a little more attention to who may be out there. We also have, that summertime kids are walking down the street. And one of the common things that we're really starting to see more and more of is everybody wearing ear pods. And with that comes they may not hear a horn or they may not hear that traffic coming up behind them. So take a little extra time with even these types of situation and give yourself a little more room, a little more time to really just relax as a professional driver. So we're talking about all the different things that are out on the roadway, who's out on the roadway, um, the summer months. But before we set out on the road, what we should really think about is, hey, let's make sure my company vehicle is meeting all the requirements of the state and the federal regulations. If you're driving a commercial vehicle, you need to make sure you're doing a good pre-trip, making sure your lights are working, your turn signals are on, your brakes are in good operating order, good windshield wipers. You want to be safe, but you want to make sure you meet all the state and federal requirements. So we've checked out our vehicle. We are ready to set out. Some of the things we need to do is think about good pre-trip planning. If you're unfamiliar where you're going, make sure you program that GPS or your cell phone for your navigation. Get that set up before we get out on the road. We know that as drivers and commercial drivers and fleet drivers, it's illegal to use your cell phone unless your vehicle is in park. Okay, so let's touch base just a little bit on defensive driving. Let's talk about distance. Typically, when I give driving classes, defensive driving classes, I'll ask drivers, how much space do you allow on the vehicle in front of you? The typical response is 3 seconds. But know what size vehicle you're driving and know what the speed is. A good general rule of thumb that those of us that have been in law enforcement and the insurance industry, we typically like to say for every 10 miles an hour of the posted speed limit, you should allow 1 second. So what does that mean? At 55 miles an hour, we should be giving a good 6 seconds of travel space on the vehicle in front of us. Then on speed, let's talk about speed. How fast is too fast? Um, you know, Too fast is anything above the posted speed limit. None of us want to get pulled over. We don't want to receive a speeding ticket, but more and more states are fining drivers for excessive speed. For example, here in Georgia, we have a super speeder law. That's anything over 85 miles an hour on the interstate or multi-lane highway. If convicted, you're going to receive several points off your license, a high fine, but then you're going to get another fine from the state for roughly $200. So watch your speed, slow down. You're not getting there any faster. The next thing, distracted driving. What's the first thing that comes to everybody's mind? Cell phone use. We've all been guilty of it at some point or another, but please put the cell phone down. Almost every state has a distracted or a cell phone law in place that states that if you're on the public roadway and you're not in park, your cell phone needs to be hands-free. It needs to be in a mount. You can use a Bluetooth headset or a one push to talk. Like is very familiar with commercial drivers. My commercial drivers, if you are stopped and convicted of driving while using your cell phone, you are going to be receiving an out of service violation under the unsafe driving category. All right. The last section I just want to cover briefly is avenues of escape. When you're driving, think about setting your vehicle up in the correct lane. Pre-plan, hey, if I have to turn off on this ramp or at a street and a mile down the road, set yourself up in the correct lane. The other thing is think about not being boxed in. Not being boxed in simply means that you have an avenue of escape in the event you need to do an evasive maneuver from another vehicle. We've all had those vehicles that will cut over, way over from a left lane and cut us off while they're getting off. You need to be react. You really need to drive defensively when you're out on the roadway. The days of just worrying about yourself are kind of over. More and more traffic's out there. Slow down, take a minute, avoid the road rage. All right, let's get into the 100 days of summer. Summertime blitz and what law enforcement is out there. Every year, CVSA and our commercial vehicle inspectors out there have the 100 days of summer. It's typically a series of road time specific roadside inspection blitzes that is focused on commercial drivers. This year kicked off on May 14th through the 16th. They had the first of the summertime blitz, which focused on drugs and alcohol impaired drivers in commercial vehicles. Our next one is going to be July 7th through the 13th, which will focus on unsafe drivers. What is that going to entail? From all accounts, we believe they're going to be focusing on the following too close, the speeding, the aggressive drivers that are out there driving commercial and fleet vehicles. And then in August 25th through the 31st will be the famous Brake Safety Week. This occurs every year, which is a high focus on the braking systems of your commercial vehicle or your fleet vehicle. A surprising note about this, they did a surprise, kind of a precursor, just about 2 weeks ago, DOT did, and they just finished this. We really think in the industry, this is a setup of what they're going to be looking at coming in August. So roughly when they conduct these blitzes, they run about 72 hours. It's nonstop. If you, I was in the commercial vehicle unit and we were told to go out there and stop everything and there was no warnings. So on average during this period, commercial inspectors conducted nationwide conduct about 59 to 61,000 inspections during this period. Now, I pulled some interesting stats from last year's blitzes, and the top 5 mechanical violations that are discovered have been brake systems in general, tires, defective service brakes, load securement, and lighting systems. So make sure you're doing those good pre-trips. If you're driving a fleet vehicle, make sure that all your operating systems are working correctly. Now, the top 5 violations for drivers that were discovered were drivers that are my interstate carriers that use an ELD, a logbook system, is false logs, hours of service, no medical cards or expired medical cards, and the improper classification on their driver's license. In general, on both the mechanical and the driver's side, law enforcement and commercial inspectors are discovering and putting out about 19% out of service. What does that mean? About 2 out of every 10 inspections that occur during these summertime blitzes, drivers are being completely put out of service, either a mechanical or a driver violation. Remember again, as of April 1st of 2024 this year, CVSA put out the 2024 out of service criteria and it went into effect. Law enforcement is enforcing these rules and regulations. So If you haven't done so, make sure your company, if you're a fleet or a safety manager, make sure you update and you have that current information. So, what do these inspections mean to you as a company, a fleet manager, a fleet director, and to you if you're a driver listening? More and more ever, you need to be prepared in the event that you're stopped. And it shouldn't be just during the blitzes, but it should be at any time. Be prepared. Prepare your drivers, educate your drivers, make sure they know how to handle a stop. So let's explain a little bit what happens. There's 3 levels of inspections out on the roadside. If a commercial vehicle inspector or law enforcement stops you, there's a level 1, a level 2, and a level 3. So what is a level 3 inspection? It's simply a stop of your commercial vehicle and a look at all your paperwork, your driver's license, your medical card. Make sure that you are registered correctly in the clearinghouse if required. Making sure your insurance, your license plate on your trailer, your tractor, everything's in good working order. A level 2 inspection will include everything that a level 3 does. But now we're going to look at your safety equipment. We're going to look at your tires, your lights, your brakes, your windshield wipers, your basic operating things that you should have caught before you ever pulled out into the yard. Remember, during a traffic stop, whether you're a fleet driver or a commercial driver, always be professional. Remember, you're not only representing yourself, but you're representing the company that you're driving for. So you receive a roadside inspection. The inspector brings it back up, the trooper brings it back up, and he states that you have 1 violation. Always make sure that you ask questions in a professional manner, but make sure you understand what your violations are, if there are any, and make sure you know how to correct them. It's always important to understand that then when it's safe to do so, make sure you contact your fleet manager, your safety manager, your immediate supervisor, and advise them of the roadside inspection. There are critical items that if you receive a violation, you need to get that report sent back into the state within 14 days. And it's also a requirement that when you return to your home duty station, the violations need to be corrected before that vehicle is dispatched the next time. All right. There are certain times you may be able to what we call data queue a violation if you believe the violation was in error. Something like that, make sure you reach out for the correct professionals to help you and assist you in that. That's one thing that I do here at HB Next and heading up the fleet and DOT section is with my background and my team's background is us assisting in writing those type of responses to the state. Companies and drivers, make sure that you're licensed with the correct CDL or endorsement for the type of vehicle that you are driving. What does that mean? All of us that are licensed driver, we can drive a car, a van, the regular pickup, service van. That's anything up to 26,000 pounds. The next step is a Class B Bravo. That is any single vehicle that is over 26,001 pounds. Now we're going to start getting into also being required to have a medical card. Now, this is where it goes up to a Class A. A Class A is going to be any single vehicle over 26,001 pounds. And now in combination, we have a trailer over 10,001 or a combination of both gets over 26,001. Make sure you're aware of your requirements in your state. And for more information, reach out to those professionals that we can help you with that. The last part is making sure you have a valid medical card. When you have your medical card and it's first issued, it's going to be issued to you for a set period of time. The max will be 2 years, and it can be as little as 30 days, depending on your medical condition. If you have, for example, high blood pressure or you have a special waiver. So you've received your good medical card. It's valid. You know what the date is. The very next step is make sure you marry that up with your DDS office. That's your Department of Driver's License Services. Needs to be married up with your driver's license or your CDL. When law enforcement stops you and checks you, that's the point that you need to reach out to them and show that medical card. Okay. So if you're an interstate carrier or driver, make sure you have a compliant ELD device. What is that? An electronic logging device. If you cross state lines, you're gone for a day or two, make sure you have the correct ELD system. And you can always check that on the FMCSA website to make sure the device you're using is correct. Some of the most common violations that are out there that are discovered by law enforcement and commercial vehicle inspectors are a driver fails to have a spare copy of up to 7 days worth of paper logs. You need to be able to have paper logs in the event that your ELD system lose connectivity or just simply isn't working. All right. Unable to transfer the logs during inspection, understanding how your ELD system works, and simply just not getting your 30 minutes of break in 8 hours of on-duty time. Okay. For more questions and clarifying any of this, feel free to reach out to us. We can help you here at HB Next. So now let's talk about setting your drivers up for success. How does that look? As HR, as a company owner, as a fleet safety manager, one of the biggest things is getting well qualified drivers. And then once we got the driver, how do we keep them? Part of that is setting your drivers up for success right in the very beginning. That's having a successful onboarding process, background check, but we also need to make sure that we're compliant with all the requirements under FMCSA. So before you hire that first driver, make sure you've updated and you have a well-written driver safety policy and make sure it's been distributed to everybody. So we find that driver. How do we find our drivers? Sometimes the best drivers we can find are word of mouth from other employees. You know, they may know somebody that's looking to come to a good company as what he feels he's working at, the culture is a good fit, and they bring him in. So, some of the things that we need to do when we start the hiring process for our driver is obviously insurance is going to require, but we owe it to ourselves, is run an MVR, a motor vehicle record that needs to consist of the last 3 years and any other outside state that a driver may have held a license for. So maybe he held a license in Florida, he moved to Georgia. Make sure you run that MVR, both Florida and here in Georgia. Medical card, if required. Make sure you verify his medical card that it's in good standing. And here's an important fact is make sure you verify the medical examiner that issued that medical card. In January 1st of 2024 this year, there was over 100,000 medical examiners that were deemed either expired or their credentials were not up to par. That meant any medical cards that they had issued were not valid at the time. Go on the National Registry under FMCSA or reach out to a professional service such as HB Next that we can help you run those systems. Okay, we've run the MVR, we've checked his medical card. Now for CDL holders, make sure you're running them in the FMCSA drug clearinghouse. The driver needs to be registered. Your company needs to be registered. If you're operating a DOT number, make sure they're not prohibited from operations from a prior drug or alcohol conviction. Next, we want to do our pre-employment drug screening. Make sure we have all these items back before we put them in the seat the first day, and then start to verify and complete all your required documentation that is in what we commonly call a DQ file. What is a DQ file and what does that stand for? Driver qualification. That's a list the FMCSA puts out of certain documents that must be completed under CDL drivers. All right. The next thing, we brought them on. We've had a successful onboarding. Everything comes back good. They're in the vehicle. They're driving for us. We're doing well. But as companies that I work with, I find a lot of companies are so fast in the hustle and bustle of our business, but we forget about giving training and continuing education to our drivers and our employees. You know, a good rule of thumb is, especially on commercial vehicles, we should be providing quarterly training, or at minimum, we should do biannual. At least give a good driver safety meeting, once every 6 months. What are these training classes look like? Really look at the type of equipment and the operation that you have. Think of the equipment you're driving, what your drivers. If you have an excavating company, you may have a large number of dump trucks, some low boys. Have your class geared specifically to them. I like to say it does no good for me to get out there and teach a defensive driving class about a long haul carrier that goes from New York to Chicago. That really doesn't serve justice for our drivers. If I have dump truck drivers, we want to cater that class directly to them. What do they see every day? Some of the things that we look at for good classes that we should be giving to our fleet and commercial drivers are defensive driving, conducting. I teach one class that is called conducting the proper pre and post trip inspection. That's where I go through, and part of it is in the classroom and part of it is a hands-on that I'll demonstrate and help drivers understand the requirements of conducting a good pre-trip and post-trip inspection. Another one is, and I've done this because of my background with the law enforcement and the commercial vehicle section, is how to set your drivers up. I give them a class on how to handle a roadside inspection by law enforcement. It can be very intimidating being pulled over, seeing those blue and red lights flashing behind you. And it's like, oh my gosh, what is he going to want? What is he going to do? I'm going to get in trouble. And I walk a driver in a company through all the steps on what to expect on a roadside inspection. And many times these inspections are just routine. They're simply pulling you over to make sure everything is compliant and working order. Another one is, let's train our drivers what to do in the event of an accident. What if they are involved in an accident and there's injuries and vehicles are towed away? Make sure they understand who to talk to, how to talk to them, who they should ask for on information from the other drivers, how to take pictures, how to document the accident scene they're involved in. The other one, and this is a very common one that I find when I talk to companies all over, is I'll ask management in the company, you're operating under a DOT number, who within your supervisors or your company roles, who is out there that is qualified and who has had a reasonable suspicion class training and is documented? And a lot of companies say, I didn't know I had to have that. Whether you're a fleet company or operate under a DOT number, you need to have one person that has gone through reasonable suspicion drug and alcohol training. It needs to be documented. We provide that here at HB Next. It's a 4-hour class, 2 hours on talking about drugs and all the effects of it, and also on alcohol. And there's a short test to retain the knowledge on that. So set your company up, set your drivers up, set your mechanical program up, set everything up for success. We all get so busy in our daily lives and operating our business that we fail to think and take a step back and provide that training and continuing education with everybody. So we talked a little bit about this summer on who's out there. New drivers out on the roadway, new teens are out there, inexperienced drivers, new CDL drivers. And what's the common goal here? Is all of us just slow down a little bit, try not to have that road rage, try not to be aggressive on the driver if they're just not going as fast as what you like or they're not in the right lane. The next part is especially focused towards my fleet and my service drivers and companies. Slow down a minute when you're in those neighborhoods and, look out for the kids and everybody that could possibly be playing. And then third, setting your drivers up for success. We just talked about that proper onboarding system, ongoing training. Reach out to your drivers and ask them what's something that would help you be more successful in your career. We want to keep our accidents and roadside inspections down to next to zero or at least a very minimum, because what continues to go up every year? Our fleet insurance is a huge cost. Underwriters are looking at that. We're going to actually have in our fifth podcast episode, I believe it's going to be October 2nd, we're actually going to have soaring insurance costs, and I'm going to have some insurance executives that are going to be guests with me, and we're going to be talking more about that. So again, if anybody has any questions on anything, always make sure that you send those comments and concerns in to us here at HB Next. I want to thank you guys for listening. I do want to field a few questions I believe some listeners have sent in. I'm going to pass it over to our producer, Garrett, who will help find some of the questions. Garrett, what do you got for me?
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you so much for a great start to this awesome inaugural episode. We do have a live question from the chat from Miss Kristen Chambers. She asks, is there a class to educate drivers on the things that they need to be checked mechanically on their trucks, or should we dedicate one person within the company to do so?
Great question. So what Kristen is asking, if I understand it correctly, how do we educate our drivers to conducting the correct pre and post trip inspections that are required not only under federal FMCSA, but also in some states? And then how do we pass that knowledge, or should we pass that knowledge on to, let's say, our immediate supervisors that are in charge of our drivers? So like here at HB Next, some of my classes that I give out, I'll give a specific class. That class typically consists of about an hour, hour and a half, with about 40 minutes of classroom where I'll go over and give examples of what FMCSA regulations say and for the type of equipment. And I cater this directly towards your company. So if your company has tankers or flatbeds or dump trucks, that's the type of equipment that I'm talking about. Then after we talk about that, then I will go out to a specific vehicle and do a hands-on demonstration. I'll give you that demonstration just as if you should be conducting that pre-trip. And Kristen, how do we get that same information? I would say we ask our supervisors to take the same class that your drivers are out there taking. So they hear exactly what the drivers are told. They know what those requirements. That's a good question.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you again for the question, Kristen. Let's move on to some of our pre-submitted questions that we got before our first episode. From a former law enforcement individual, we have a question that says, why should I have driver training classes? This will cost me money and downtime, and shouldn't drivers already know how to do most of this stuff?
Absolutely. As a driver, a professional driver that holds a CDL, there are numerous tests and pre-trip hands-on inspections and driving tests. And yes, a lot of that is. But if you've ever noticed, once we get our driver's license, if we don't get violations, we never go get tested again. Ever in our career. We might have to do an eye test, but other than that, we never get tested. And if we don't continue to update that knowledge, we can forget it. The big thing now is with fleet vehicles and commercial vehicles, if you're involved in an incident, you can almost guarantee that attorneys and the insurance of the opposing side are going to say, how did your onboarding system look when you hired this driver? What does your company policy look like? When was the last time you gave classes or continuing education to keep your drivers up to date on the current laws and requirements under federal and state level? So it's very important to continue that ongoing education. I know it's hard to do a work stoppage Monday through Friday because that costs a company tons of money. Let's hold a class on a Saturday morning. It's very common. The last couple Saturdays, I've been having classes 7 o'clock in the morning because that's the only time we can get all of our drivers together. Make sure when you give those classes, however you're giving those classes, that the person and the company that is giving them is well versed in their credentials behind what they're giving. Always make sure your class is documented. Make sure if it's like a defensive driving class or a reasonable suspicion class, that typically what we call a test is giving. What does that show? It retains the knowledge that that student received during that period of time. Always add that to a driver's DQ file. Keep those files up to date, very manageable. I recently was with a company, and I just want to say that they had a great system, except for everything was on paper. They brought out books and books of files, and I said, what happens if we have a catastrophic event and I lose all that? And they just looked at me. You really should start thinking about going into a cloud base where all of our stuff is kept out there in the cloud. We can pull it up at any time, and there's good documentation. For more information on that type of a thing in our classes, again, reach out to us here at HB Next and send an email if you just need more information.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, actually, I think you touched on another question as well, inadvertently during your explanation there. We talked a little bit about how to contact us and how we can help with some of that driver training, which is phenomenal. So I appreciate the information there. We have one more question that was pre-submitted. Let's go ahead and go to that question real quick, and then we have a follow-up from Miss Kristen. So the last question we want to talk about today that was pre-submitted is it talks about the telematic data and the concerns that of the data privacy. So the question reads, how do you appropriately message telematics to a workforce concerned about, in quotations, the big brother effect, their personal privacy? So how do we address the concerns about personal privacy when we're talking about telematics data on the road?
Great question. And I wish there was a very cut dry response to that. And I will say in our third episode, I believe it's going to be August 14th, I'm actually going to be talking about the 5 steps of properly onboarding a telematics system within your company. I really will get in at that point. I'm going to get into talking about identifying, does your company need a telematics and a camera system? If it does, what type of incidents are you seeing that you feel need to be put in the front light? Maybe we've had a lot of accidents and insurance is saying, hey, your rates are going up, and we want to document that. The next part is getting the right system for you, then a successful onboarding system. And what does that mean? That means first, rewriting your onboarding policy in your driver safety policy, and then explaining to your drivers before you roll that out. We're going to talk more about that in future episodes. So please register for those next events or submit more questions to me or reach out to me directly and we can have a more of a one-on-one. But I will also have some guests that will be joining me from the telematics companies, and they'll be here on that episode. Great question. Thanks, Garrett.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do is we have a follow-up from Miss Kristen. Would it be a good idea to have a pre-trip checklist for each truck and keep that as a log to show that the pre-trip was performed on that truck before leaving out for delivery?
Absolutely. Good question. And there's kind of 2 parts to that. So, yes, you want to have a form that addresses the type of vehicle that you're driving or your driver has. And then you have to have a ways that if there is a violation or a mechanical defect, that driver fills it out, it's documented, it goes to the maintenance, whether it's a third party or in-house, and then that's signed off on when that mechanical issue has been corrected. Now, on the DOT side or FMCSA says in regulation that a company must keep record of all pre and post trip inspections, and you must keep record of that for 3 months or 90 days. We are currently in June, so a company would need to produce all of its pre-trip, post-trip inspections that were conducted in May, April, and March. It's always revolving. So every 30 days or when you get into the next month, and July 1st, a company is allowed then to purge their pre-trip and post-trip inspections from March.
Awesome. Well, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Colton, for all your expertise and knowledge and answering those questions today. It's been extremely helpful to our audience. I know they're extremely happy. Um, so listen to the audience, everybody. The recorded session and the future topics will be found on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and YouTube. The live stream will also be pre-uploaded to our YouTube channel and will stay live there. So you're more than welcome to come reference this episode anytime. Our next episode will be on mastering driver safety, building a foundation for a secure fleet. That episode is going to go live on July 10th and, of course, be ready for download and listening on all available platforms in the next week. All of our episodes will be going live at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, so please subscribe and go ahead and get yourself ready for those episodes. If you found today's discussion helpful, please share and subscribe to our YouTube channel at HPNext Corp, or simply typing HPNext in the search bar. You'll find our channel pretty quickly. Feel free to leave us a review. It really does help us out in the algorithm. Join the conversation on social media at HPNext using the hashtags TheDRIVE or the other hashtag HPNextTheDRIVE. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, feel free to reach out to us at thedrive@hpnext.com. Until next time, everybody, stay safe and keep driving towards a better future. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.